All right, this is Co-Play Media on Rip Radio Network, and we're here interviewing the great Starr Long, and we have Richard Garriott de Caillou. Did I get that?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Pass the test there. So, Richard, I'll go ahead and start with you with a few questions. Normally, I start with what inspired you, but I've read around a little bit. Ultima is kind of credited as being the original for MMO. Is that correct?
Well, Ultima Online would be the original, but don't forget, I'm an old folk. I got a lot of gray hair. I go back long before this youngster joined me and drove the Ultima Online team. I started writing the Ultima just solo player role playing games,
right.
And in fact, their predecessors goes for me it goes back to 1974. And when I began to do little games on a teletype that eventually grew into my first games on an Apple II, this game called a Calibeth, which is sort of Ultima Zero in 1979, 1980. And then throughout the 80s and 90s, wrote Ultima 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, as well as some spin-offs. And then finally, after all of that, we get up to the first MMO, which is Ultima Online, which is where this guy comes in. And by the way, it's still a long time ago. It's still 25 years ago or something of that nature. But when this guy got started, but yes, and even though I get a lot of credit for Ultima Online because it's Ultima, which I started that franchise, this is the guy that really kicked off Ultima Online, built the team, built the product, and created not only the first great true MMO, but the fastest selling PC game in Origin and EA history at that point, and the only Ultima that is on its own singularly in the Hall of Fame.
You just happen to get all the credit.
I get the credit. Well, I do often get the credit.
But he's always generous about it.
But that's true. Well, just like you, I kind of started this with me, but I'm going like, really, I get credit for Ultima. This guy gets credit for Ultima Online.
That's how it always ends up being. What is that led you to take Ultima from its humble beginnings into that MMO world? Like what was the snap? It's had some network.
Well, what's funny is we were so I was in QA at the time, and we in our dinner breaks. It was 1995, and Doom had just come out, and so and we could play it over our network, and it was like, oh my god, it's multiplayer, and my joke is that it was a rocket to the face that led to Ultima Online. And so we were playing a death match, and I rounded a corner, and someone had beat me to the rocket launcher, and I got the full-on rocket to the face, and I died. But that was, bam! I had this thing of like, oh my god, like players are so much more interesting than AI. And I also had grown up playing Dungeons and Dragons, like pretty much, I guess, almost everyone in the game industry, and I remember just what an amazing social experience playing Dungeons & Dragons was. And so the original pitch for Ultima Online was actually a networked game, not over the internet. And it was called Multima. And what it was really going to be was a party-based adventuring game, not necessarily a sandbox. It was literally going to be Ultima, but instead of AI controlling the party members, other players would be the party members, and it was going to just be like 6 or 7 player multiplayer over a local network. So you would have to do like either like a LAN party like Doom or whatever, but you do these little adventures. But then, and that was literally the first idea after the first week, and that's the idea that had sort of been floating around already. But then we started doing more research and looking at things that had sort of gone before, like the original Neverwinter Nights. Genie Air Warrior, Muds and Moos, an even earlier example called Habitat that LucasArts had done, and that was a graphical online game played over the internet, and it was like, oh, we could use the internet to connect way more people than like 7 people, and that's where the pitch for Ultima Online sort of came to be, and we're like, oh, well, we could do something really, really interesting. But you have to remember, at this point, the World Wide Web had just launched. Like, Electronic Arts didn't even have a public-facing website. There was no concept of like someone registering and making an account. Like, there was all these things we had to invent. Yeah.
Yeah, but also another thing about that time too, though, is that Ultimas were always a simulation of multiplayer Dungeons and Dragons. And so we always wanted to make a multiplayer version. We just kept looking at the very slow modems that existed and the amazing expense of paying $5 a minute or something it was to have AOL or whatever it was back in those days, and it just wasn't an economic model that was viable, and at least not for a big frontline product like we were used to making. And it really was the advent of the World Wide Web that made us go, now is the time. At least made us go, now is the time. Yeah. We still then had to get the company to buy into it. Right. And so we after we put together the pitch for Ultima Online, we went out to Electronic Arts to do their greenlight meeting, which means you give your design documents to sales. Sales makes projections. You look at the projections versus the cost you're asking for, and if the return is good enough, they'll greenlight your game. Well, the way they make the sales projections is based on comparables that already exist. Well, there are no comparables that already exist. So their forecast for our sales were basically none. And so they were saying, no, you can't make that game. And so we came back 6 months later, pitched the same game. They said, comparables are still none. No, you can't make that game. Came back 6 months later. So it's been a full year since we really believed now was the time. And they said no a third time. And at that point, we literally just did the childish stomp our feet and hold our breath and said, we're not leaving unless you let us at least build a prototype to show you why we believe in this so much. And begrudgingly, they let us go build a prototype, and they still didn't believe in it until the prototype, which had the first website, the first EA public-facing website was Ultima Online, where we asked people to sign up to pay us $5 for the privilege of getting a DVD, CD, with the data on it, since the modems were too slow to download it, and 50,000 people immediately signed up to be beta testers, to pay to be beta testers, and EA went, oh, we get it.
Yeah.
and then it became the most important thing happening.
Cool. That's quite the story. I guess that kind of answers the second question that I have here. What challenges do you face in developing, let alone launching and supporting such?
Oh, there were a lot more though. There were a lot more.
Yeah. So because there weren't really any other big successes. Air Warrior I think was the biggest game to date. And it had about 30,000 at its peak, and so. Electronic Arts really didn't get it. Even Origin didn't really get that this was going to, people really weren't going to play games over the internet. Multiplayer games isn't going to be a big deal. And so we were kind of the bastard stepchild. And so we, and also there wasn't anybody in the company who had experience making multiplayer games. So we kind of had to go outside the company to find people who had experience making multiplayer games, and so we kind of went out into the MUD community, and that's who we did our initial hiring from. So consequently, they were folks who didn't really have a lot of experience, at an actual job. They had just been volunteers making MUDs, right? And so that was part of our staff. The other part were, it was kind of like, the school, the playground, when you pick the teams, who's it's like I got the last pick, same with equipment, whatever computers were the hand-me-down computers, I would get those. Then even office space, the building was being remodeled, and all of the other
projects.
all the regular projects Wing Commander and other things, they got the pick of we'll get this office, and the offices that I and my team got were the ones that literally were being remodeled around and had the walls removed, and there was an arrow that when you got off the elevator, it had an arrow going this way, because if you went the other way, you would literally, it was on the 5th floor, if you walked out, there was literally no external wall and you would fall to your death. Yeah. And which made things really interesting in the winter. And we couldn't figure out why it was so cold in the winter until we realized that the server that we were running, the pre-alpha, was sitting underneath the thermostat, spitting out a whole bunch of heat. So the thermostat thought it was warm all the time, and so would never turn on the heat, and we were all freezing in the office because it was exposed to the outside, right? But it thought it was hot all the time because the server was sitting right underneath it. So we faced a lot of hardship because no one really cared or thought we were going to be anything important. But then it goes back to the things I was saying is we had to invent all these things, all these things we sort of take for granted right now, the concept of having an account of any kind on the internet. like having a username and a password that did not exist prior to Ultima Online for our company. Like I mean, think about that for a second. Like something you take so for granted, the concept of a username and a password. Another thing we had to invent was the game came with 30 days free. Well, we'll rewind. The idea of having a subscription for an online service, that was something we invented, because before that, everything was paid by the minute or the hour, right? And so we were the first game to have a monthly subscription. So we had to invent that, and then the game came with 30 days free. And in order for you to give you that, we had to invent the concept of having a unique alphanumeric code that had economic value. And that was something that didn't exist prior to Ultima Online.
And by the way, this list goes on and on and on, from the jobs that people did, new jobs, community management, economy management. There's tons and tons of new terms, shards, the MMORPG itself. All these kind of things were invented up and down the line to make it work.
Yeah, and then of course, not really understanding how the players were basically going to run the game themselves, no matter what we did. Right. They were just going to do whatever the hell they wanted, and it didn't matter what we tried to do. They're going to kill the king.
One way or another.
They're going to do things like the first business. We were so proud because we built this sandbox with like this amazing virtual economy of where they're gonna craft gear and sell it to each other and things. But the first business that was started was a prostitution ring. And so this guy, Fly Guy, at the docks in Britannia and that was making way more money than anything else. And there wasn't any like animations to support it. And,
no, they would just take people around the corner into the bushes and go ooh ah at each other, but that was enough.
And they would bow. And the characters were just I'm like, oh my god. And then there were the world's oldest profession, literally.
But then there were other things that we thought that we were all so proud of that just fell apart instantly. Like for example, one of the things that I was really excited about anyway was we even created this virtual ecology. We made it to where grass actually produced a supply that herbivores like deer and sheep would like. And so deer and sheep would repopulate any area with grass, and they'd come to equilibrium with how much grass you put there. So you didn't have to design it, you just let nature take its course. And we also had wolves that spawned in the mountains, and the wolves would come down to the mountains and eat the deer and sheep. And that would also come to balance. And then we set it up to where if a player had gone out and killed off some of the deer and sheep that would be eating the grass, the wolves wouldn't find any sheep or deer, and so they would wander into town and eat a villager, which would set off some quests. So the village would say, hey, help, we need to be safe from the wolves. And then you could fix that by either killing off wolves or repopulating sheep, whatever it might take. And we just thought that was so cool, except as soon as we opened the gates and let all the people in, people slaughtered everything. And so we could not spawn sheep and deer fast enough for them to exist for more than a few seconds before someone would kill it. Yeah. And the same thing for the wolves. And so the virtual ecology no one ever noticed, and so we eventually just removed it. And so literally we put person years worth of work into a system that literally nobody ever even knew was there. No. It was so overrun, it was like it never existed. The EverQuest that was doing it, I think, is no more. Am I right about that? Okay, so
EverQuest Next was going to do it, and then
But I freaked out as soon as I saw that on their feature list, they described it the same way. I was going like, oh no, they don't know. this is a really bad idea. And I actually said that before when they were still operation. I think I have said that publicly, and you chastised me about it. Don't diss another product. But I'm going, but they don't know. They're running into a ditch.
It's a minefield. We should warn them.
Yeah, warn them.
Dangerous game and unpredictable too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's. So what's the weather like in outer space? Let's get the questions out. What's the weather like out there?
Well, okay, so I'm going to turn this around, and I got to ask some questions from kids that I thought were really great.
Oh, great!
Because I think they have inobvious answers. Is it hot or cold in space? what do you imagine if you could stick your finger in a spacesuit and stick your hand outside the window, or get in a spacesuit and climb and step out? What would you imagine? Do you imagine you would freeze, or do you imagine you'd burn up?
Imagine I'd freeze, depending on how close I am to the nearest energy source or what have you.
Well, you're not floating near the space station, presumably. So what's interesting about that is the definition of temperature is the rate of vibration of a molecule. So like if you're boiling water, as the hotter it gets, the more faster the molecules vibrate, and then eventually they'll vibrate so fast they fly off and become steam at about 100 degrees Celsius. But in space, it's a vacuum. There are no molecules, so there is no vibration. So technically, it has no temperature. It has no temperature. And so it's just fascinating. The answer is it doesn't have one. But the practical question from a kid's perspective is, will I feel hot or will I feel cold? And it turns out that's also difficult to answer, because it depends on whether you're in the sunlight or not. As it turns out, that if you are in the shade of the Earth, which you are half the time, or even if you're on a spacewalk and you're in the shade of the space station, where there's no heat warming your body up, you are actually radiating infrared heat away from your body slowly, and you'll get colder and colder and colder and colder just because you're in the shade. And you'll get colder until you literally, become, in the end, absolute zero. It would be the eventual limit. On the other hand, if you're sitting in the sunshine, the thermal loading you get from the sun is way overpowering compared to that little bit of infrared leakage. And so you'll get hotter and hotter and hotter until you literally cook. You will not be able to radiate it away. In fact, it's one of the way you will die if you fail to re-enter is you'll actually die by overheating, and you'll cook. You'll die by being cooked. No, it's just literally like the warmth on that sheet. The sunlight coming in warms up the sheet, so you would just get warmed up, and there's just no way to get rid of the heat. You can't sweat. There's no air to breathe. The air is convecting away the heat that's on our body, but in space, again, it's like a perfect vacuum thermos that will keep it whatever warmth there stays in, other than this infrared radiation I was talking about. But the sun is so much more powerful that you'll cook inside your spacesuit. And so a spacesuit actually has a big lever on the front of it that lets you swing from monumental amounts of air conditioning to monumental amounts of heating to overcome this whole problem. So the answer is both. So it's space has no temperature, really, in a sense. And yet, from a personal experience, it depends if you're in the sun or the shade. You're either going to burn up or you're going to freeze.
That was a lot more of that answer than I thought I would get. That was really cool, man. I appreciate it. Let's see. Let's go back to Starr. You worked for Disney for a spell, yeah?
I did.
Surely the mouse is a gentle, benevolent boss and dictator, yeah?
Oh yeah, totally. There's all sorts of names that they call it that I can't share. Well, no, I can share one. The Mouse Mines. Actually, Disney is a fantastic place to work, and I'm really glad I went to do it. I was also glad to leave.
I've kind of been through this cycle a couple times now. I built Origin, sold to EA. We built Destination Games, sold that to NCSoft. And when we started Portalarium, we debated, do we want a relationship with a big company? And for us, the answer was definitely not now, not at the beginning, because that sort of immediately puts us back into that same problem. And so instead, we did something quite new. We did crowdfunding. So we went out directly to the consumers and said, look, we want to do something that's kind of old school and has these areas of innovation, but is not the sequel to a big existing property. So we don't think this is going to be exciting to the big publishers, but we hope it's exciting to you, the player. And it turns out that was true. And so we're the second highest crowdfunded game in history, and hopefully be releasing it here at the end of this year, and hopefully make everybody happy.
So let's talk about that. Shroud of Avatar, Okay. What do you guys hope to accomplish with this project? What are you hoping to do aside from, of course, making money?
Well, so for us, again, we have some touchstones of the past and some touchstones of the future. If you look at the games we've done together, Ultima Online is one of the biggest touchstone probably for the game. And what's interesting about that, though, too, is that we feel that even though that game came out in 1997, almost no one has sort of chased that gameplay model. Everyone instead has chased EverQuest and Worlds of Warcraft. And in those games, everyone is first and foremost a combatant. Right. And the content of the game is level gated, so you really have to level up to be able to explore the world. Right. And Ultima Online was not that way. It was a big open sandbox with lots of diverse roles of role playing that people could interact with and need each other for, frankly. And none of the content was level gated. You could explore everywhere as level 1. And if you combine that with the storytelling that we did from Ultimas 4 through 7, where I think we did a really good job of telling deep, rich stories about virtue and moral, ethical parables and things of that nature. And then going into the future, where we sat down and said, while everybody's been chasing this other model, we think that role-playing games have sort of become too brain dead. You know who you need to talk to because there's an exclamation point, and you know where to go because there's an arrow on the map. And some games literally have autopilot, and it just goes there for you. And so we're going like, that's not, it's fun enough apparently because those games can solve quite well. But we think that there's a better way. So we've tried to go back to the roots and say, look, we can't make people draw their own maps like they used to have to do in the other Ultimas. We have to journal for people. We have to map for people. But we don't have to lead them by the nose by putting arrows in the map that means you're not even paying attention to the surroundings that you're wandering through. And so we're trying to find new solutions to old problems to kind of take role-playing games into the future. I know that you talk about the selective stuff.
Yeah, and another difference, another thing we're trying to do is give players a lot of choice in how they want to play. So most games are either a single player game or they're an MMO. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, because we basically have two fan bases. We have the players who, loved the Ultimas, and loved the stories that Richard would tell, and then we have players who really loved Ultima, and loved Ultima Online, and loved the sandbox MMO aspect of that. And our idea was like, well, what if we could do both? What if we could make a game that had both? And so we made this tech that we call selective multiplayer, and we give players the choice: do you want to play offline or online? And so you can actually flip a switch, and you can make the game a single player offline RPG. And if you just want to play the story that Richard co-wrote with Tracy Hickman and follow the paths of truth, love, and courage, and kind of immerse yourself in that, you can do that completely offline. You just have to log in once to verify that you bought the game, and then after that, you don't have to log in again ever. And in fact, in that mode, everything we have a store that you can buy extra cosmetic stuff like prettier swords and fancier houses and things like that. It's all cosmetic stuff. But in the offline mode, all of those things are in the game that you can earn them through in-game gold. So you don't actually ever have to spend anything on the store in the offline mode. You can get all that with in-game gold, because we really wanted that to feel like old school RPG, like when things like an online add-on store didn't exist, right? But then if you want to get online, you can turn the switch and you can be online. And then but even in that mode, we wanted to offer you various options, because we are now, and so you can say you want to be online and you want to see other people's stuff, but you're still kind of shy and you want to be by yourself. You can play single player online. And in that mode, you're connected to the servers, you're getting updates, you're seeing things that other people have done. Like if they put a shop down and they have a merchant, you can buy stuff from their merchant, but you don't have to see anybody else. You're in your own instance. Or you can play in what we call friends/party mode, where it's just you and your adventuring party. And again, you don't have to really see anybody except those people that are in your party together. And then there's an open mode, which is more like a traditional MMO where you're playing with everybody. But again, you can now offline and online is kind of firewalled. You can't take your offline character and bring it online, because all those things that I was telling you about are available, and so those things that you have to pay for in online. Plus, people could cheat, use hex editors and things like that in the offline mode, and then try and bring those online. It would mess up with balance. I know it's shocking that people would cheat. I know. It's so weird. People can't be trusted. It's such a shock. But in all three online modes, you can freely move your character back and forth between those three online modes in real time. And at first we didn't think people would do that. We thought that people would pick a mode and stick to it, but people move back and forth between those modes constantly, like based on
and they're requesting new modes.
Yeah, and like in fact, the newest thing is they're asking for a mode that dynamically switches back and forth between the online modes based on situation. Like when I get into town, I want it to be open, but when I'm out adventuring, I want it to be party mode, and automatically they want it to automatically switch back and forth. And it's like, okay, I guess we can do that, sure.
Yeah.
So that selective multiplayer we think is unique. I don't know of any other game that lets you have an offline and online mode. In fact, I think the last game that had anything like this was like Diablo 1 and 2, where they had an offline play and an online play. So.
This probably sounds really refreshing. Yeah. Is it currently in an alpha and a beta here?
So we kind of don't. We were initially using those terms, but because we are doing this very sort of open iterative development model, so we do monthly releases on the last Thursday of the month at 10:30 a.m.
As in 2 days ago.
And so we just did our 45th release. So we've done this 45 months in a row, and knock on wood, we've never been late. So for 45 months in a row, we've made 10:30 a.m. every time. And in this really sort of open iterative development, we kind of feel like the terms alpha and beta don't really mean as much. And so we just call it early access. And so we're not done, but we're not really beta, we're not really alpha.
We think we'll be done somewhere near the end of the year.
Yeah.
And so we think we're in the last few months.
Yeah.
But exactly whether that's 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, one of those.
Yeah, no, when the time is right.
Yeah, and we do.
And then we'll call it done.
Yeah.
But then we'll just keep releasing every month. So it's just a word. It's just a term of art.
We do free trials. So we let people try it out for free. We run free trials generally about 3 weeks out of the month.
Okay.
And it's free. It's the online version. And there's a few things that you can't do. We like the free trial players can't trade with the online players just because again that's
to cheat
hackers and farmers and
yeah.
that. But but other than that, you're free to go and play the whole game pretty much. And we added that free trial version just because we want people to be able to try the game before they spend money. And the next free trial we'll announce the dates for the next free trial round probably next week. And we highly recommend that people try it before they spend money. In fact, like if you go to our Steam Early Access page, we have in all caps, please do not buy the game. That's our marketing.
That is our marketing message. Our marketing message is literally, please do not buy this game.
Yeah.
I don't think EA would greenlight it.
No. Please read all the negative reviews before you buy the game. We don't want,
it's fascinating when we're crowdfunded and we're doing this open development where the players get to see every stand-up note of every meeting of the team, all the monthly reports, all the quarterly reports that we use internally, they get to see it all. And what's interesting is the players that started with us 45 months ago, what they got delivered 45 months ago was what we called the chicken room. It was a room with a chair and a chicken and a torch. And you could sit in the chair, you could turn on and off the torch, and if you walked into the chicken, it would cluck, 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 and walk away from you. That was the whole game. Okay? And so when month 2 came around and you were outside the room and you were actually on a map, that was a big improvement, right? So people were like, ooh, wow, this is way better. And when in the next month there was an NPC that actually had a conversation, that was way better. And in the next month when you could pick up a stick and hit him with it, that was way better, right? So the people that were with us from the beginning, every month they're going like, wow, this is getting better and better and better, and we can see it near the end, and we're very excited about it. What we found is the closer we get to launch, the people who have not been with us for the whole journey, if you jump in right now and release 45, even though you're told it's not finished, it kind of looks finished. And so in your mind, it's easy to start judging it as if it's a finished game. You start going like, well, I like this game, but half the spells don't work. Well, yeah, we know half the spells don't work.
Right.
And you should know half the spells. We make no illusions about half the spells don't work. Or you might go, I don't like this particular piece of the UI. Well, sometimes the UI gets better, and we're making changes to the UI all the time. And some months it's better, some months it's worse. We try different experiments. And so we find that people who come in the first month, a new player comes in, they need a lot of hand-holding to understand what it is like to participate in an unfinished game.
Sure.
And that's why we put up the sign that says, "Do not read this. Do not buy this game unless you read all the complaints." Because what happens is still people, despite the fact that, by the way, this has been a year. This message of "Do not buy this game" has been up for the last year, and despite that message, people still buy the game. And then when they go, "Hey, this UI sucks," or "There's half the spells don't work," they then write that as their review on Steam. "I hate this game because the UI sucks or half the spells don't work." And we're going, well, we tried to warn you. And so yeah, we find it's a fascinating aspect of this kind of open development is teaching people what it's like to participate.
Hopefully the community has your back, though. Those guys.
Well, they do. They do.
Out,
yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah. So if you, but in the case of Steam, we can't moderate those that website. It's there's no moderators on it, so it's a kind of a free for all. So all of our trolls like to go hang out there, and there's always a few. So so we try to send people over to the core community sites where where people go like, yeah, we get that. Let me tell you about the chicken room and tell you how far it's come.
That's cool.
That's it. Yeah.
Is it a fun project so far? Has it been like a lot of work, more of a project of passion? How's it been so far? Trying to realize the screen.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to take something you often say, Starr. Apologies, but if we're not having fun making the game, it is risky that players won't have fun playing the game, and we've been through enough cycles to feel that and know when that's happening, and we're having a good time making this game. We really do. You look at this team. First of all, part of the brilliance of this guy is he manages teams really well. We don't do crunch. On almost every project pre this guy taking over management, had endless crunch. Mm-hmm. You're always a year or two behind schedule by the time you finally release, and that means you've probably been crunching for a year or two straight in a lot of game companies, and that is just abusive to people's soul,
right.
In my mind. And so we don't do that. We release every month. We're on time with the releases, but we don't care what things made the release and what things got pushed to the next month. And so, sure, on release week, people will do a little bit of overtime, but it's not month after month after month after month. It's a few days, and then not for a month, and a few days maybe, and not for a month. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing this because we love making games. I mean, that's the fundamental thing. Like, there are way easier ways to make money. Games is not an easy way to make money, and so the only reason we're doing this is because we love it and we have fun doing it. I mean, and so and this project in particular, we're doing it because we love games. We love this project. We love this community. I mean, I've never seen a community come together and do stuff together like this community. I mean, we have they run events every day. I mean, they run a community events calendar, and on that community events calendar is literally something cool every single day. They invented a sport called Gust Ball, where they took the Gust spell from the Air Magic School, which is what you would expect, where you push. It's a crowd control spell, right? So it pushes the enemy away from you. Well, they took our house decoration system, and then they used that to build a court with goals, and then one player would volunteer to be the ball, and then the other players would gust him around to try and get him in the goal. And then one player is the referee and keeps score to how many times the player got gusted. And then they figured out, we can gust pets too. So then they're like, well, one player doesn't have to be the ball. We can use that player's pet. So then they were using cats and dogs. And it was like, okay, this is kind of disturbing. So why don't we make you a pet ball? So we made them a ball. So they made a Gust Ball. And then we made them and then they built a league. And then they have there's a Gust Ball. There's actually 2 Gust Ball leagues. And they have a season. And then players also started a web radio station called Avatars Radio. And then another player said, wow, it'd be really cool if we could stream that radio station in the game and have that in our houses. And we're like, oh, that's a neat idea. And another player said, well, could I build the radio? Because we have steampunk tech in our game. We're like, sure. And so a player built a little steampunk radio, and we put that in the game, and it streams web radio stations. And so players now use that not only to stream web radio, but they use it to do sportscasting for the Gust Ball tournaments.
Live into the game.
Live in the game.
And another group used that same radio to put on the front of stages when they put on plays. So instead of text just popping up over the heads of their characters as they stand here to try to act out a play, they actually talk into their own microphones through the radio station that broadcasts through the radio that's sitting on the front of the stage. So you hear the real voices of the real actors acting out the play.
Yeah, and so that and that kind of stuff just brings me immense joy. So so when you ask if I'm having fun because I get to see stuff like that happen.
Yeah. What game are you currently playing? Aside from what you are currently
So I made a commitment long ago that I would play games every day, and so it got easier when there was mobile. That used to be harder because I'd have to make time to be in front of a computer. Let's see. Right now I'm still playing Hearthstone. Believe it or not, also been playing a little squad base building shooter based on Walking Dead called Road to Survival. It's basically an XCOM clone, but it's Walking Dead. It's kind of fun because I just finished XCOM 2 and I needed another game like that. Just finished Dishonored 2. And before that, it was Fallout 4, which, oh my god, I played so much of that. Jesus. Especially obsessed about the base building in it. Oh my god, I'm obsessed about the base building. About to start playing Prey. Yeah, that's a good enough sample.
Yeah. And me similarly, interestingly, where all my gaming used to be on PC, I'm actually playing more now on mobile than PC, just for practical reasons. And so, I also went through the Monument Valley 1 and 2 of late.
Oh, Monument Valley, I forgot. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't say those even.
I didn't even say that one.
I assumed you did.
No.
And I have to confess, I'm still playing Pokemon Go.
Nice.
I'm level 30, so and I travel extensively. So since I travel all over the world, I got the rares from other continents, and I have a couple of legendaries that I've managed to track down. But prior to that, the first mobile game I truly loved was Plants vs Zombies, which Plants vs Zombies 1, of course, not 2. And then a few others. The Kingdom Rush series I'm a big fan of, things like that. So,
really cool. Well, go ahead and close it to it and bring it to an end. This is Brandon from Co-Play Media. We're here with Starr Long, and we had Richard.
Garriott de Caillou.
Okay. I missed the T on the first time.
Oh, you can say Garriott is more French, but Garriott de Caillou is more oui.